What really happened at a traditional Irish wake? A body lies in a small Irish cottage surrounded by candles. Relatives kneel in prayer. Neighbours arrive carrying food. Clay pipes are passed around. Stories are told. And before the night is over, someone may begin singing, playing a game, or even laughing. Why did traditional Irish wakes contain so much life in the presence of death? To modern eyes, the combination may appear contradictory. A wake was a time of profound grief, yet some could also become crowded, noisy, and surprisingly energetic. This was not because the dead were being disrespected. The traditional wake performed several purposes at once. It honoured the deceased, comforted the family, kept watch through the night, and brought an entire community together at the moment one of its members was leaving it. There was no single set of wake customs followed everywhere in Ireland. Practices differed between counties, families, religious communities, and generations. Much of our evidence comes from 19th century observers and the enormous schools collection of Irish folklore assembled during the 1930s. Together, these accounts allow us to enter the traditional wake house. Death usually occurred at home. Once it had been confirmed, the preparation of the body often became the responsibility of experienced women from the family or neighbourhood. The face, hands and feet might be washed, the hair was combed, and a man's face could be shaved. The deceased was dressed in a habit, shroud or suitable clothing before the hands were joined in prayer. Rosary beads or a cross were commonly placed between them. Some families stopped the clock at the time of death. Several candles were positioned around the body, although their number varied. In one County Roscommon account, either 3 or 5 candles were lit. Even the room depended upon the family's circumstances. In a larger house, the body might be laid out in a bedroom or parlour. In a small cottage, there might be no spare room. An account collected in County Wexford remembered that the dead were sometimes waked in the kitchen. That detail is important. Death was not removed from ordinary family life. It entered the same room in which meals had been prepared, children had gathered, and stories had been told. The wake commonly lasted 1 or 2 nights, although its length varied. During that time, the deceased was not left alone. This has encouraged the popular explanation that wakes were held primarily in case someone had been mistakenly declared dead. Fear of premature burial certainly existed in Europe, and people occasionally connected it with watching the body. But that explanation is far too narrow. Keeping watch was also a religious vigil, a final act of care and of social duty. Prayers were said for the soul of the deceased, while the constant presence of relatives and neighbours ensured that the bereaved family was not abandoned during the first terrible hours after a death. Visitors entered, knelt beside the body, prayed and offered their sympathy. Some remained briefly, others stayed throughout the night. The household was expected to provide hospitality, even when the family had little money. Tea, bread, tobacco, snuff and alcohol appear repeatedly in descriptions of Irish wakes. Neighbours could help by bringing provisions. One account from County Leitrim remembered visitors arriving with tea, sugar and sometimes loaves of bread. Clay pipes became especially associated with the traditional wake. Pipes and tobacco were purchased for the visitors, while snuff might be placed near the bed or distributed among those present. Whisky was also provided in many districts. These were not merely refreshments at an unusual gathering. Offering food, drink or tobacco acknowledged that the visitors had come to support the family and accompany the deceased through the final night at home. Then there was the sound of mourning. The Irish word cuineve means a lament or weeping for the dead. In some places, skilled women known as keeners or maná cínte perform laments over the body. A keen was not necessarily a song with permanently fixed words. It could combine cries of grief with improvised verses praising the deceased, recalling family connections, and describing the suffering of those left behind. Other women might join the lament, rocking or crying as the emotion moved through the room. Keening could resume when new relatives arrived, during the funeral procession, or as the coffin approached the burial ground. The practice was repeatedly criticised by church authorities, particularly when professional keeners or uncontrolled public displays were involved. It gradually declined, although records and memories survived into the 20th century. But prayer and lament were only part of the night. As the hours passed, stories were exchanged, songs were sung, riddles, cards, contests, and games could begin. Thomas Crofton Croker, writing in 1824, described Blind Man's Buff, Hunt the Slipper, and several games he considered distinctively Irish. One was called The Walls of Troy, another, Short Castle, whose lines drawn in chalk and counters placed in an attempt to form a row of 3. More than a century later, folklorist Sean O'Sullivan documented an astonishing variety of wake amusements. They included storytelling, music, tongue twisters, matchmaking games, feats of strength, practical jokes, and competitions held inside the house or in a nearby field. Some were playful, others were physical and could become extremely rough. Furniture might be overturned, clothes dirtied, and unfortunate participants soaked with water or struck as part of a forfeit. Occasionally, the disorder extended beyond the wake house. Gates were removed from neighbouring farms, crops were disturbed, and old disagreements could erupt into fights. Clergy and other authorities repeatedly attempted to suppress the rowdiest activities. Their objections were not difficult to understand. Alcohol, crowded rooms, youthful energy, competitive games did not always produce peaceful results. Why, then, were games tolerated at such a serious moment? One practical answer is that they helped keep people awake during vigil lasting through the night. They occupied a large gathering in a confined space and distracted an exhausted family from continuous grief. But the games also expressed something deeper. The death of one person disrupted the ordinary life of an entire community. Work could be suspended while the body remained in the house. Neighbours left their farms and homes to attend. Normal boundaries between solemnity and entertainment were temporarily loosened. Laughter did not cancel grief. It existed beside it. A story about the deceased could cause a room to laugh and then fall silent moments later. A game might occupy the younger visitors while relatives continued praying near the body. The wake allowed sorrow to be experienced collectively rather than privately. We should also be cautious about claiming that every unusual custom was a direct survival from pre-Christian Ireland. Some writers have attempted to trace wake games back to ancient funeral contests, but proving an unbroken history is extremely difficult. What the surviving evidence demonstrate is that Catholic prayers, local folklore, family tradition, and community entertainment became interwoven. The Irish wake was not one untouched ancient ceremony. It evolved over generations. When morning came, preparations began for the funeral. The coffin left the house that had sheltered the deceased for the final time. Neighbours might carry it part or all of the journey, and prayers could be offered when the procession stopped at a crossroads. The community that accompanied the family through the night now accompanied the deceased towards the grave. Traditional wakes changed considerably during the 20th century. Hospitals, undertakers, and funeral homes assumed responsibilities once managed inside the household. Wake games largely disappeared. Clay pipes became uncommon, and keening almost vanished. Yet the central principle survived. In many parts of Ireland, people still gather around the deceased. They offer sympathy, share food, tell stories, and remain with the family. Serious prayers can still be followed by laughter over a remembered incident, because affection does not disappear when grief enters the room. The traditional Irish wake was never simply a party beside a corpse, nor was it merely a precaution against premature burial. It was the community taking responsibility for death. The body was prepared with care. The soul was remembered in prayer. The family was fed and supported. The night was endured together. The long stories, the songs, games did not deny that someone had died. They reminded everyone present that the person had lived, and that those left behind would need one another more when morning came. That may be the most important reason the Irish wake endured. It transformed a private loss into a shared farewell.